Well, there's going to be some discretionary spending, but my cuts in discretionary spending. But my assessment of where Sperling and the White House is that the grand bargain that they were after, and kind of a mini grand bargain that might still be possible, would protect these investments that are now part of the sequester in exchange for some structural changes in our long-term structural deficit, which entitlements are very much a part of. So, there is a long-term, short-term
what's to
trade-off
prevent
here,
Republicans from coming back and saying we demand more cuts on either the?
Well, they're always going to demand more cuts, but that doesn't mean the president's going to give them more cuts. So that depends on Democrats staying in power. But sure, 10 years from now, even after we've got changed CPI or some other thing, if you have a Republican president who wants to take a machete to important discretionary programs, we're going to have to prevent that from happening.
But if we have
in the meantime,
Democratic control of these things,
we need to take rational steps to put these programs on a sustainable basis. And the point that you are not acknowledging is, and by this kind of happy talk about Social Security, these programs are not on a sustainable basis. They're not.
Why don't we simply raise? I mean, we can eliminate the problems with Social Security that you're talking about by simply removing the cap. We can deal with Medicare.
Removing the cap. You say simply, that is the heaviest of heavy lifts. I favor it, and I think that you could get some adjustments in the cap that could provide real revenue. But this kind of liberal fantasy of, we just remove the cap, and then that's all. That's the only argument we have to make.
How is the notion that we're going to keep
argument?
But how is the notion that we're going to prevent future cuts to discretionary spending any less fantastical? I mean, what is the?
Because a Democratic president is all you need to prevent those draconian cuts or these idiotic cuts we have right now in the sequester.
We have a Democratic president, and those cuts have now kicked in.
But that's because they made this Procrustean bed in July of 2011. But moving forward, because they had them by the short hairs on the debt ceiling.
But they'll have them on the short hairs in a year from now, too, won't they?
Well, no, I don't think so.
But, I mean, this is my point, is that the most recent history we have, starting as of Friday.
The environment is not the same as it was in July of 2011.
But it seems to me that it seems to me that there's absolutely no evidence whatsoever from a political standpoint. We put aside the notion of the implications of cutting Social Security or Medicare, the policy implications. From a political standpoint, there doesn't seem to be a shred of evidence that in any way that if we cut Social Security 20 years down the road, for no one over the age of 55, or Medicare, we raise the eligibility age, forcing people to buy private insurance. There's no evidence whatsoever this is going to forestall any discretionary cuts. I mean, it seems to me just as fantastical.
I reject both of those reforms. I think that, the idea of, both of the ideas that you just mentioned, I think would be bad ideas and actually cost everybody more money. But look, there are a lot of reform ideas on the table. The two that you just mentioned, I think, are dumb. That's not my argument. My argument is that Democrats have to start thinking about this in a real way and not just say, we can't means test because then it turns it into welfare, or just raise the cap or eliminate the cap and that'll take care of everything. Those are not reason. I agree with them, but they don't put the Democrats in a rational and relevant place moving forward with this demographic bomb. So what I'm asking for is for smart people like you to give more thought to the long-term problems and not just assume, well, that's Pete Peterson and these deficit hawk Simpson Bowles types who we don't have to pay any mind to. A lot of their remedies, especially the recent Simpson Bowles remedies, which I think are almost pathetic, as if there was no election, are wrong. But what I'm suggesting to you, Sam, is the basic diagnosis, the actuarial and demographic, trends are irrefutable.
Well, I would agree. I mean, we're going to at one point.
We need to get a handle on that.
If I stipulate that, we're not. If we stipulate that the long-term debt may be an issue for the sake of this argument, but I think the answer is just as well that we are significantly lower in terms of tax revenues relative to GDP. We could raise those taxes. That's a rational expression. But from a political standpoint,
I agree.
We have halved the deficit in the past 4 years, the fastest rate since the 50s or 40s. And 7% of the population knows this. We know what happens when any type of cuts to Medicare happen, even if they're not benefit cuts. The Republicans run on that and they win. And so what you're making, it seems to me, is a political argument.
No, they didn't win on. They won on that
in 2010. They won.
2010. They won on that for a lot of different reasons that partly relate to the Democrats doing a terrible job of defending themselves that year. But
it's very hard to defend when you take a step in that direction, you cut Medicare payments.
Well, that's not a reason. That's not a reason to irresponsibly condemn future generations to having nothing in discretionary
Well, wait
income.
a second. I think you're doing that in the same way. In fact, I think if Democrats were to embrace Social Security and Medicare cuts and then go into this next election, we'd have a far more greater chance of future Republican Congresses cutting those discretionary funds.
Well, not if the Republicans have voted for it. I mean, the problem with the Obamacare, Medicare...
well, they could vote for it today. You're calling for Democrats to vote for it. You're calling for Democrats to vote for it. They voted for the $500 billion in Medicare cuts as well, and they still demagogued it.
No, I don't. I think if there was some kind of a grand bargain, they would have to find other issues to demagogue. Because it would be very hard for them to vote. In other words,
your faith in the Republicans,
so you're fighting the last war, Sam. I mean, if they do a deal, some kind of a grand bargain that's reasonable, that's on the president's, that's acceptable to the president, they then in 2014 will have a hard time running against that. So you're fighting the last war.
Paul Ryan had the same cuts in his budget to Medicare as the president did, and they ran against it.
I know that was chutzpah. But
they got chutzpah. That's the reality.
But basically, Sam, you're making an argument for gridlock, and that's just not a responsible argument right now.
I can't change who the Republicans are, but I can see what they do.
You're making an argument. You're making it sound as if any creative thinking about entitlements is a sellout to Republicans. And that's
I think
not a responsible place.
I don't think it's a question of it being a sellout to Republicans. It seems to me that on both a policy level, it's problematic, but frankly, on a political level, it seems to be malpractice. Because at that point, I mean, if the Democratic Party does not protect
responsible, you've got to deal with these issues. You're not a baby boomer. I am. Okay,
I'm pretty close, Jonathan.
My Grateful Dead buddies are going to be.
I saw the Dead 7 times
in the senior, getting so
I
much.
Saw you in one of those shows.
So much more. Do you have any idea how much more we're going to take out than we put in?
I know that on Social Security, your average person on Social Security actually puts in.
Said it's supposed to be insurance against need. That's what insurance is. If you don't get in the car wreck, you don't get the insurance at all from your insurance company for the car accident. If you've been driving safely, nothing happens. If my house doesn't burn down, I don't get the money.
I understand, and I think that we can certainly increase. We could we can increase the premiums. We can increase the premiums. You get more out of Social Security than you put in for the average person. You get about 2 times more, 3 times more in Medicare. But you can just have the rich pay more premiums, and that's a very simple solution, and it's actually more consistent with what our tax numbers have been in the past.
And I favor that. Where we don't agree is that it's for you, it's lift the caps or nothing. And I think that's not enough. That's just not creative enough. It's not realistic
aren't you
enough,
then negotiating
and
if the
ultimately it's not
solution is
responsible
to raise
enough.
the caps to get back to a traditional level of income being subject to the payroll tax? Right now we're about 8% lower. I mean, isn't that the most rational response? And from a political standpoint, if the Democrats
Yeah.
are propose benefit cuts, then who is going to propose the most rational response, which is to raise revenue?
I agree. I mean, I wrote in my column, I am for lifting those caps. But what I'm also for, and which I can't get you to accept, is that this old argument that somehow, these programs need to be preserved in amber, that we can't take a hard
I actually
look
think
at
that
both
we should
Social
increase
Security and
benefits and lower the retirement age if that constitutes not being an amber when it comes to Social Security. And I think that we need a
Medicare. Lower
buy-in
the
for
retirement
Medicare.
age on Social Security?
Of course.
On Medicare, we want to lower the eligibility age for Medicare because Medicare is much more efficient than private insurance.
Indeed.
So I'm very much against what Joe Lieberman really screwed the country when he killed the idea of
55-year-old
extending
buy-in.
Medicare down
Yes.
into 55-year-olds. So we agree on that, but lowering the retirement age from 65?
I think that we need to drop it for a couple of years to deal with
Why?
our employment crisis. But we also know that there has been a massive failure of 401ks. We know that when we talk about the historical perspective on Social Security as 1/3 of the three-legged stool, that those other legs have now crumbled in terms of efficacy. We know that your generation, the baby boomer generation, has depleted so much of their 401ks that people have a fraction of what they're going to need. I mean, so the idea of cutting benefits on Social Security for that cohort in particular is going to be devastating to them, and we're going to end up having more poor people who are going to end up draining more out of that discretionary spending that we're talking about.
I don't want to do that. I don't want to hurt those people. And this is what I think is a little demagogic coming from the left, is that anytime somebody talks about making changes, you say you want to hurt those needy people. I don't.